So in this video, I want to explore strategies for optimizing sleep if you have ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, long COVID and related conditions. I'm going to share practical strategies based on my personal experience because I had chronic insomnia at one point when I had ME, CFS and fibromyalgia. And I'll also draw on my professional experience working with many clients who've experienced sleep issues. So sleep issues are an issue for many people. You may be familiar with some of the concepts I share, but I really invite you to consider the difference between knowing and putting these strategies into practical action. If you'd like notes from this video, let me know and I'll create some. So at the end of the video, I'll tell you how you can access another video where I'm going to do a deeper dive into how we can shift our physiology into a state that supports sleep. Let's talk about some of the factors that influence sleep. One obvious one is ME, CFS, and any health condition can actually impact on your sleep. Stress can be a factor. If you're experiencing anxiety, that is going to impact on your sleep quality. Hormones can be a factor, particularly for women of a certain age. I'm not going to talk too much about menopause. That's not an area of expertise, but do check out YouTube. There are lots of useful videos which talk about herbs you can take, supplements, etc. So do check that out if that is an issue for you. Medication can be a factor. So if you are on medication, it's worth just looking up the side effects and discussing your medication with your doctor. Sometimes I work with people and they're on lots of medication and it's having quite an impact on their body. It's affecting their sleep. Now, one of the common things that can affect our sleep quality is part of living in, 21st century or, in a technological age, which stems back to the invention of the light bulb. So, light at night can actually interrupt our sleep. We'll talk a bit more about that. Also, trauma can be a factor for some people I've worked with. They've found it difficult to fall asleep because, when they fall asleep, they start remembering stuff. Very briefly, I want to talk about sleep meds. They are supposed to be a short-term solution and a last resort solution. But often when I speak to people, they have been on sleep medication for a long time. That is problematic because one of the side effects of some of the sleep medications is fatigue. So it's causing the very issue that people with ME, CFS are trying to resolve. So again, if that is an issue for you, do talk to your doctor and also talk to pharmacists because they tend to know more about the pharmacology of drugs and explore ways of safely reducing sleep meds. I remember reading some research by a professor who was saying that actually sleep meds tend not to be that effective over the long term. Okay, so it might be that the effects are, what you think are the effects of the medication is actually something you're generating via your beliefs. So fitness can affect our sleep quality, and obviously that is an issue for people with ME, CFS. So, we'll talk a bit more about some of the things we can do to actually improve our ability to do physical activity. So there is human variation in terms of how much sleep is needed. Some sleep experts acknowledge that people are different. Some people are more naturally night owls, they say. Some people are more naturally early risers. I'm more an early riser. I love going to bed at a reasonable time and I love getting up early and enjoying the quiet of the day. I love being in the park at 7:30 in the morning doing my exercise. It's a really lovely time, especially when it's a nice day. Sometimes the sunrises are absolutely amazing. And I'm curious to know how much of our sleep patterns is a result of evolution, that's our natural tendency, and how much of it is an environmental response. I used to go to bed late, but it's not something that I do routinely now. So I'm sharing this information. It's really up to you how you use it. I'm not here to tell you what you should be doing. And if your energy is great, then that's fantastic. But obviously, if you've got ME, CFS, energy is an issue. When I used to go to bed routinely after midnight, and this was before I had ME, CFS, I was always tired in the morning. I was always hitting the snooze alarm. And now I never hit the snooze alarm. And usually I don't even wake up to my alarm. I wake up before my alarm and I have to turn it off. So sometimes people, when people are talking about their fatigue and we look at their routine in terms of what time they get up, what time they go to bed, and if they go to bed late, I say to them, what are your options, do you think, that might impact your sleep? And some people are resistant to change. They like going to bed late. And I completely get that because I was very resistant to going to bed at an earlier time. But I'd really encourage you to think about what is your priority. Is it that lifestyle pattern of going to bed late, or is it, enhancing your health? And we know that if we get our sleep right, it can make a difference. And Professor Matthew Walker, who's a sleep expert, says that poor sleep can actually dramatically impact our health, and it actually can result in early death. So this is why it's really important to get this right. So there is another professor called Sachin Panda, and he is an expert in circadian rhythms. And he says that if you put people in an environment where they are not exposed to natural light, then their body will find a rhythm. And he says that people tend to go to bed around 9 o'clock, 9:30, and wake up between 6 and 7. So that fascinated me. There's also been experiments where they took a group of people who were experiencing insomnia and they took them camping, and they weren't allowed to take their devices with them. And what they noticed before they took people away is when they tested their blood is their melatonin levels were out of sync. Our melatonin should be rising at nighttime and it helps us sleep. And what they were finding is that because of the artificial light, they had lower melatonin levels when it should be higher, and so they don't feel tired. And so people went camping for a week, and at the end of the week they found that people were getting up and going to bed 2 hours earlier than they normally do. So hi Claire. Claire's saying, I used to go to bed at a reasonable time before getting ME/CFS, but would feel exhausted and felt better for a time going to bed later, but also have sleep apnea. Since doing things to heal circadian rhythm, I feel better sleeping earlier again. That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Sleep apnea can be an issue. So, and as part of this camping experiment, people were getting morning sunlight, which strengthens the circadian rhythm, and they were, getting limited exposure to light at night, which meant that encouraged them to sleep. So I like to consider, what are the implications of that research? So I'm going to share a few observations. One, when I had ME/CFS, my sleep was bad. One of the factors was that my digestion wasn't working, so I would wake up hungry at night. And I made a video talking about digestion recently, so check that out. I was experiencing psychological stress, and that was inhibiting the quality of my sleep. And I have noticed, since I did get to a point where I was able to work again and do exercise and function, that even when I have had periods of stress, I now notice how that impacts on my sleep. I actually tend to wake up early, so it's almost like that stress is preventing me from getting the quality and the depth of sleep that I get when I'm actually calm and relaxed. So when I had ME/CFS, if I overdid it, then that would cause physical stimulation. My body would be stimulated because it was activating the fight, flight, freeze mechanism, and that impacted my sleep. I was also worrying about sleep. And what happened is I got to a point where I was so tired that I stopped worrying about sleep. And from that point onwards, I did not use up lots of energy thinking about and worrying about sleep. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. So it's really important to address whatever factors are, important in your sleep quality. So for me, it was digestion. For me, it was psychological stress. And one of the things that really helped with that was learning brain training techniques. And I also had to address the boom and bust pattern because that was a big factor for me. So I want to share some tips. So the first thing is, we really need to think about great sleep hygiene, what great sleep hygiene is. First point I'd make about that is we need regularity, okay? So sleep experts say, we need to have regular times of when we go to bed, regular times when we get up. And once we get into that routine, it becomes much easier and automatic. I ideally go to bed by 10:30. Last week I was looking after my mum because she's not very well, so I was very busy, and I was making sure because we were eating early, I was making sure I got to bed by 10 o'clock. I'd wake up 6 o'clock, 6:30. I always generally give myself about half an hour if I wake up at 6 or 6:30 before I get up. But it's quite nice just having that time. So that's the first point. We've got to have that regularity. It helps the circadian rhythm. Next point. What is the key thing that is impacting our sleep for many people? It's light and technology. I'm going to talk about, first of all, habits before bed. Okay, so when would you say sleep hygiene starts? Claire says, I've found not having access to the internet after 9 p.m. helpful. Yeah, I'll be talking about that in a bit. Sleep hygiene begins 2 hours before you go to bed. What I would say is sleep hygiene begins the moment you wake up. But if you think about it, what we're doing during the day is impacting our sleep. If we are in a state of worry and stress, then that's going to impact on our sleep. Okay, so sleep hygiene begins the moment you wake up. And so I'm going to be talking about all the things we can do during the day to just really support good sleep. Monitoring, worrying about our sleep. And that's what some clients have said. When they wake up, the first thing they do is think, how was my sleep? Was it good? Was it not so good? So that's one thing we've got to avoid, okay? Having those constant conversation when we wake up, okay? So sleep hygiene begins when we wake up. So I really encourage you to think about how you reduce stress, how you develop stress management techniques. It might be that you need to audit the stresses. What are the things that are causing you stress? And start thinking about some solutions. Donna says, it's ironic that it's after 2 a.m. here and I'm watching Facebook Live about good sleep habits. Lol. Having said that, I've been working on improving my sleep routine. That's great. Sometimes it happens. I'm fortunate that I don't experience as much insomnia as I did when I had ME/CFS. But when I had ME/CFS, I experienced a lot of insomnia. Now it's much rarer. And it's often if I haven't eaten enough, actually, or haven't got enough exercise. So Third thing I really want you to think about is getting light in the morning. Obviously, all of these tips, you have to use your judgment. But if you are able to get out in the morning and get some light on your skin, that strengthens our circadian rhythm. And the flip side of that is making sure at night we turn the lights down. So I know one doctor who encourages people to turn their tech off at least an hour and a half before they go to bed. There's some research that shows that that should be 3 or 4 hours before sleep, which I know is challenging for many of us. That would mean me turning my MacBook or my telly off at about 7:30 or 6:30. Not quite ready to do that, but I do aim to do it at least an hour and a half before bed. And, some people advise wearing blue light blocker glasses, I mean. So next tip is around movement. As I say, this is something you just have to use your judgment. If you have ME/CFS, if you're very limited in how much you can move, you have to stay within those limits. And make sure we do movement hours before bed. We don't want to be stimulating ourselves too much before we go to bed. Next point is avoid late afternoon naps. Some people say avoid napping after 3 o'clock. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I had ME/CFS, I broke those rules because initially I was sleeping, for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. I was still going to bed and sleeping throughout the night. And I needed to do that because I was absolutely exhausted. But as I started to get better, those periods of rest got smaller and smaller and smaller. At one point, I was just doing an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. And then I got to the point where I just do a 20-minute meditation in the morning, 20-minute meditation in the afternoon, because I think that's a really good thing to do. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about, the environment, okay, your sleep environment. A few points about that. We need to be in a cool, ventilated room, okay? So in winter, might be that you need to ventilate the room during the day. If it's too cold, have your window open at night. If you can, just have it cracked so that you're getting some fresh air. It's important that you address any things like mold or dust, which aren't good for our health in general. If you can put plants in your bedroom, then they're good because they clean the air. If your budget allows, you can try air filters, but a stuffy, airless room is not conducive to sleep. I'm surprised sometimes when I've been away from home and I've been staying in an Airbnb or whatever, and the room's been very stuffy and it kind of felt like the room hadn't been ventilated properly. So I always have to open the room because I can't bear being in a warm room. And the next thing, it needs to be a dark room. So where I live, I've got street lights right outside of my house. And when I first moved into this place, I had sort of blinds which are a sort of ivory colour, and the room would get light in the summer at about 4 in the morning, and I would wake up. And after a while, living here for quite a time before I decided, I had a friend staying with me and I got her some blackout curtains, and I thought, actually, that's what I need. And it's made a massive difference. I do not wake up at 4 in the morning now. I generally just wake up, as I say, 6:30. So if you can, within your budget, that's something that if you can address it, it is going to make a difference. Briefly, I want to talk about the stuff we're putting into our body. If we're putting alcohol in our body, if we're putting caffeine in our body, then that can impact our sleep. So caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. Some sleep experts say, look, if you're going to drink coffee, drink it first thing. Okay, and some people say, yeah, but I'm not really affected by drinking coffee. And I used to say that, but Professor Matthew Walker says it does affect your sleep quality. So let's talk about bedtime routine. And I'd be really interested to hear how much of this stuff you're doing. So first thing is really thinking about relaxation. Do you have a relaxation routine? Clients have said that when they do some relaxation meditation, either just before bedtime or at bedtime, whilst they're in bed, it enhances the quality of the sleep. I remember when I started going to meditation class when I had ME, I would always sleep better. And I've had clients who've said to me, I'm not really stressed. And I remember a few clients saying when they started doing relaxation techniques before bedtime, they all said they slept better, which kind of tells me that perhaps it wasn't quite true that they weren't stressed. Let's just pause a moment there. And I say I'd really be interested to hear from you. What are the things I've talked about so far are things that you are doing? What are the things that you think actually you could be incorporating into your routine? I've been working on my habits recently. As some of you may know, if you're in my Facebook group, I've started getting up first thing and going to the park and doing my Qigong in the park. And it's really lovely, especially when the weather's good, to be there, to be out in the park, getting sun on my skin. And it's a really nice start to the day. Walking first thing when I get up is useful. I thought that said waking first thing. Walking first thing when I get up is useful. So is that something you are doing or you're going to do? And Lynn says exercising when I wake up. Excellent. Let's move on to sleep time. Okay. So if you are finding that you can't sleep, I just want to share a few tips for that. First thing is, if you find that your mind is going round and round, get it out of your head, okay? Write it down. Sometimes when my mind is going 10 to the dozen, I found it really useful. Don't use tech, because that's going to expose you to blue light, which is going to wake you up. But I'll just get pen and paper. I'll put the light on really low and I'll just write stuff down. Then I know I can stop thinking about it. Okay. And, if you're upset, journaling can be a useful thing to do, to just write it down, get it out of your system and finish with thinking of just brainstorming a few strategies to help you deal with that issue. Okay. If you are awake for more than half an hour, sleep experts suggest you actually leave the room. So one of the things I used to do is, okay, Donna's saying, yep, writing is a huge help. Yeah, I find it really useful as well. So when I had insomnia, when I had ME/CFS, I would leave the room. Sometimes I would just get up and do some gentle stretching, and sometimes that was enough to just relax my body enough to get me out of my head to get back to sleep. So you can practice, do some meditation, do some yoga. Sometimes I've done boring tasks like filing. You might read a book, but again, make sure the light's low and make sure it's a hard paperback rather than reading your Kindle. I teach a very simple exercise. If you'd like a copy of that, you can access it in my Facebook group. Many people have said to me they've used that exercise and it's helped them get back to sleep. If you can't sleep, really important, you're not engaging in negative dialogue, because all that stuff, oh no, I'm not sleeping, I'm going to be so tired, is just going to generate the stress and it's not going to help you sleep. So you're not allowed to clock watch. I really encourage people to not be able to see the clock from their bed. Okay, we need to let go of those goals, I must sleep, and focus more on, okay, what do I need to do to just calm my mind and body? Obviously, especially at the moment, no, Kindle's a great idea. Lisa's saying, I was thinking of getting Kindle. Great idea. Just don't be looking at it at night. It might be, my version of Kindle is quite old. It might be that they've incorporated technology, which means you're not being exposed to blue light, but that's something to check out. For instance, with my laptop, I've got this, I'll write it down actually. I've got this little bit of software called Flux, and what it does at night, it changes the spectrum of light that's being emitted, so the laptop isn't emitting blue light. Lynn's saying sleep stories got me asleep. Yeah, that's for adults. Yeah, that's a great idea. My daughter used to listen to sleep audios at night, and it always helped her get to sleep. Yeah, what I was going to say is at the moment in lockdown, more people are at home. For instance, my next door neighbour is a cab driver. He's usually out at night, but because he's at home for the last 5 months, there's been issues with noise, which has disrupted my sleep. It has got a little bit better, but I do still get woken up in the night. And in the past, I would have got really annoyed by that. But now I have said to him, look, if you disturb me at night, I might knock on your door at 2 a.m. And I've been tempted to do that a couple of times, but I have thought, you know what, let's just stick an earplug in, and I've decided just not to. I think if I did get up and knock on the door, I might just get a bit more annoyed. So I haven't done that. So that can be an issue. My philosophy about that is this is going to get sorted. At this point in time, the council won't come out to listen to the noise, but at some point they will, and at some point this will get sorted. I was working with a client, and that was an issue for her, and one of the things we talked about is what action she might take, whether she needed to go and speak to her local councillor or MP and see what can be done about this. I am envious of people who live in countries like Germany where they do not tolerate noise at night. My aunt who lives in Germany tells me that the police are very strict on that. We haven't got that culture here yet, but I think if enough people pushed for it, maybe we'd get some change on that. So I want you to consider, do you need more calm in your life right now? Is stress an issue? It definitely was for me, and it was something that I couldn't resolve on my own, and I did need some help. And as I say, learning these brain training techniques made a massive difference. I remember working with a client. I was going to Norway at one point every month for about a year, because one of my clients came to London in a wheelchair and stopped using her wheelchair after one day of the training. And because she went back to Bergen where lots of people got sick because the water got polluted, she said to me, you've got to come to Norway. Lots of people want to do this training. And I trained a group of people in Oslo, and one of the women who did the training said she'd been an insomniac for 22 years. And on the second day of the training, when I got down to the room at about 8:30 in the morning, she was already there. And she said, hello, Simon, I'm a sleeper now. She'd had her first night of sleep. And actually one of the challenges that I set her was, in the first day of the training, she was wearing black clothing. And she says, yeah, I always wear black. And so one of the challenges that actually the group set her was to bring some colour into her life. And so on the second day, she was wearing this beautiful pink jumper. But anyway, she resolved her insomnia. I stayed in touch with her for a number of years, and she resolved her insomnia from that day. Now, sometimes it can take longer. For me, it took a bit longer. I remember a client said it took her about 3 months, but, she just used the tools that she'd learned to cultivate more calm in her life, and sleep took care of itself. So thanks for watching this video. I'd love to know what your action is going to be. What are 1 to 3 action steps that you can take today to start shifting your experience of sleep? As I mentioned, I'm going to be doing another video where I explore how to shift from being in a state of stress, sympathetic arousal, into the parasympathetic state, which supports good quality, restful, regenerating sleep. So if you'd like to watch that video, then click the link below and join me either live at the correct time or watch the replay. Thanks for watching. Keep going. You've got this. Dare to dream big dreams. Bye for now.